Brothers and sisters, welcome back to the Behaviour Revolution Scriptures. My name's Mark, and I hope you're really enjoying going through these scriptures with me. It's been a blast. It's completely blowing my mind, the things I'm discovering and things Yahushua's telling me to do and not do, and include and not include, and it's just totally refreshing. It's like diving into a deep pool of water, crystal clear water, and Yahushua says that, you know, crystal clear water, our minds need to be washed in the water of His Word. But we need to take our eyes off the world to do that, and it's very hard in this 21st century day and age of swiping and you know, going down and scrolling and Facebooking and Instaing and everything. It's very hard to take our mind, unplug ourselves from the system and stop looking at what the world, and come into what Torah says, come into what Yahushua's instructions are for us, for you personally, because these scriptures are personalized. They are for the whole body of Yahushua's bride, but what you get from them, from the Ruach inside you, Yahushua talking to you, is very personalized. So last episode we finished up with the sacrifice of Yitzhak, and that was a massive test for Abraham to give up his son and be willing to sacrifice him, even though he believed he would come back to life, because of the culture they were in. The people were sacrificing children all the time. It wasn't such a shocking thing to hear. So he obviously believed Yitzhak would come back to life, and as we know, he didn't have to. It was symbolic. The ram was caught in the brambles, and Yahushua is our lamb, and that was just a shadow of what Yahushua was going to do generations and generations later. So today we're going to finish up with the story of Sarah and how she died, and then we've got a little bit of Abraham doing a bit of wheeling and dealing to get some land, and then we go into an amazing story about Yitzhak finding a bride. Well, Abraham finding a bride for his son, I should say, because Abraham's getting old and he wants his son to have a bride. How's this blood covenant of deliverance, because that's what it's all about, blood covenant of deliverance, how's it going to pass on from generation to generation if his son doesn't have a wife? So he'd waited 100 years to get a son, a covenant son, and now this son, who's in his 30s, probably older now, doesn't have a wife. So let's keep going, brothers and sisters. We'll just revise a little bit here, and there's a chart there which you can go through in your own time. I didn't find it particularly fascinating, that chart. There's lots of characters that aren't really in any of our stories here. They're descendants of Haran and Nahor, and that I know of, not many of them, if any, come up later. So we'll just skim. You can read that yourself. Let's finish with Sarah, the little last bit of Sarah's life. At the age of 127 years, Sarah died in the land of Canaan, and a completely devastated Abraham wept over the body of his bride for many days. Then he went to the town elders of Kath and said, I know I'm a foreigner here, guys, with no rights, but I'd really appreciate it if you'd give me some land to bury my wife on, please. He wanted to bury his wife. He was a traveller. He didn't own any land. Yahushua had promised him land, but he didn't own anything. And remember, this guy is just as wealthy, if not wealthier, and had more people than a lot of the kings surrounding him, and yet he had no kingdom, no land. So he's had to go to this town, to the town elders, humble himself and say, can I please have some land, buy some land to bury my wife on? And because he had a good reputation with them, the elders said, of course you can, Abraham. You are not only our friend, but you're a prince of Elohim among us. Please bury your wife wherever you want. It's no problem for us. Sounds nice, doesn't it? Friendly. So Abraham said, thank you. Could you ask Ephron, owner of the cave at Machpelah, if I could buy his field for whatever silver he wants? For I want to bury my wife there. I want to bury my wife there, right there. And Ephron, who was actually sitting amongst them, stood up, saying, "No, it's fine, Abraham. You don't need to buy the land or own it. You can just use the field and the cave to bury your wife in." But Abraham insisted, holding cunningly to Yahusha's promises of the land in Canaan. He wanted some land. He wanted to get his foot in the door. I understand. I'm trying to do the same thing. He wanted to get his foot in the door. He wanted some land. He was promised the whole land of Canaan, and he didn't own any of it yet. And these guys are saying, it's okay under the guise of friendliness. We don't really want you, a foreigner, to own any of our land. But you can, sure, yeah, go bury your wife there, it's fine. Because technically it's still ours. We can do what we want. And he's saying, no, under the guise of friendliness too, I want to buy it off you. So Abraham's saying, he says, no, it's fine, Abraham. But Abraham says, please, look here in the blue. I'll go up a bit. In the blue there, please understand me. I want to pay for the land and own the title deed instead of living on someone else's property. He's sick of being a traveller, an alien, a sojourner. He wants a piece of his own land. So please understand me. I want to pay for the land myself. So please tell me how much silver you want. And Ephron said, well, if you insist, the land is actually worth 400 shekels of silver. But it's really not necessary, Abraham. We shouldn't even be talking numbers right now while you're still in mourning. Please, just go and bury your wife. He's still trying to get out of it. But Abraham weighed out 400 shekels, which is about 5 kilos of silver, which was the currency of the merchants, and gave it to Ephron, officially purchasing from the elders of Gath the deed to the field and the cave at Machpelah near Mamre. Remember where his trees were? And all the trees within its surrounding borders. Remember where he was sitting when Yahusha and the messengers came and met with him? He was taking in the afternoon sun by the terebinth trees of Mamre. So he loved this piece of land. It meant something to him. It's where he'd built altars. It's where he'd met Yahusha. He had fond memories and he had a nice feeling about it. He just loved this land because of what it meant to him, and he wanted to buy it. He's going to start his little empire right there. And he'd officially bought some land. Where am I up to? And Abraham, so the deed to the field, he bought the deed to the field and the cave in Machpelah near Mamre, and all the trees within its surrounding borders. And Abraham finally buried Sarah, his darling wife, on the land in Mamre, which Yahusha had just legally given him, and where he had built the first stone table to Yahusha, who had visited him in that very spot years before, raising up his eternal blood covenant of deliverance with him. This all started when Yahusha appeared to him and lifted up a blood covenant with him, raised up an eternal blood covenant with him, and then renewed it. And all this happened because of what Yahusha was doing through this man. This piece of land, this here in the turquoise, this piece of land in Canaan was incredibly important to Abraham because he guarded the promises of Yahusha. This piece of land in Canaan was incredibly important to Abraham because he guarded the promises of Yahusha. And a small part of it was now legally his because Abraham didn't give in. He could have been so overwhelmed with grief, and they just finally got a son, and they'd been past the test and been through all this amazing stuff, and Sarah's died. He could have been overcome with grief and just stuff it, I'll just bury her wherever. But no, he stuck to what Yahusha had told him. In the back of his mind, he knew, the forefront of his mind, he knew that he was promised land. He'd already started scoping it out and walking around it to claim it. But now he's officially purchased some. Does this make sense to you, why it's so important to him? Because he guarded the promises of Yahusha. Do you guard the promises of Yahusha? Not just the eternal promises of everlasting life, of the wedding feast, of the first resurrection, of the promises, our great expectation and our hopes. Not just those things, but in the natural, day to day. If Yahusha's asked you to do something, if Yahusha's put a goal in front of you, and you know it's from him because of the reaction from everybody else around you, then you've got to go for it. Yahusha's done that in my life. I've come from nothing and nowhere I had achieved nothing in my life well into my 40s. And Yahusha put this plan in front of me to purchase this house that I'm in now. And it's been a long slog. My ex-wife went against it at every step of the way. And everybody, friends, family, have run me down, said it's, it's horrible and you're not going to be able to achieve it and you're not going to do it and you're being used and you're being cheated and you're being this and that. The most horrific lies have come against me from achieving this. It's one of the nicest houses in this town. It's amazing, this house. And I feel amazing living in it. And so just similar to Abraham, he felt amazing about this piece of land because of what Yahusha had done for him. Even though I've been immersed 15 or so years, Yahusha really started to turn up the heat in my life as soon as I moved into this house. Training my children, divorce, and we're going to go into that later on here. But yeah, my ex-wife, she didn't want any part of Yahusha anymore. She worked with us for years, writing songs, and well, that's the thing. I wrote the songs, she sang them. I did shows, and every step of the way there was a fight and a battle. Why do we have to do this? Why do we have to do that? Why can't we have friends? Why can't we go out and do what everybody else does? Constantly behind the scenes that nobody ever saw. Behind the scenes, just going at me all the time. And eventually, when Yahusha turned up the heat and about what we should do with the children and how to raise them, and it got personal and more specific, how Yahusha wanted us to live and what to do, and now to buy this house and achieve in life. We've got 6 children. And now I've got 8 because I've remarried, and I've got 2 more children as well. So I've got 8 children. You can't just stuff around, So, and I know it's a wicked system. It's an incredibly wicked system. We're all slaves. And we've got to come out of Egypt, but we've still got to work and to provide for our families. So anyway, you may not want to buy a house, that's up to you. But for me, this is the goal that Yahusha put in front of me for my personal growth, because I just squander everything I get. Go on spending sprees and waste all my money. So Yahusha's been training me and focusing me to not spend money. So that's between me and him. That's my personal journey. If you're on a similar journey, great. But Yahusha gives everybody a specific, in the natural, journey that they're on, a pathway that they're on. And it's not to do with their deliverance, but it trains them, helps them overcome the world. Because generally the things we have to overcome in the world are things we have to, mature in, to make us overcome and mature. So anyway, enough about my walk. That's just me personally, what I've been given, and that's why this story touched base with me, because he's saying, I'm sick of just renting. I'm sick of just living on this piece of land as a hillbilly. I'm sick of just traveling through. I'm sick of being a bum. I've got more people than you do in the cities. I want my own piece of land. Yahusha's promised me land, so I want to pay for it. I got the money. Give me land, man. So do you understand that, brothers and sisters? It may not be anything to do with land for you. It might be a different journey whatsoever. But whatever Yahusha gives you, the point I've underlined here is Abraham guarded the promises of Yahusha. Promises for eternal promises, and promises for his life. Promises for your life. Do you guard the promises that Yahusha's given you? That he will look after you, that he will provide for you, that he will provide for your children and look after them till they're a certain age and while they're living under your household. Do you face that? So Abraham did. And a small part of this land was now legally his. So we're going to close that section now and go on to Yitzhak, because this is amazing understanding what Yitzhak, well, this story isn't really about Yitzhak. Yitzhak just comes in at the end. This story is about Abraham sending out his servant, Eliezer, his most trusted servant. Remember the 2 who were, before Yitzhak was born, Abraham thought this might be his only descendant. So, let's go on. A spotless bride for his only son. Now, Abraham was a very old man, and Yahusha had blessed him in every way. Every way. But his only son still remained without a wife. So Abraham called his oldest, most trusted servant and chief over his whole household, Eliezer, the one who he once thought would be his only heir, saying, Eliezer, come, sit with me. Place your hand under my thigh and swear to me on the name of Yahuwah, the only living Elohim of the earth and the skies, that you will find my son a perfect bride. But do not look for her among the local Canaanite women here, but go further out, back to the land of my birth and my relatives, and find a bride for my son Yitzchak there. Why didn't he want him to find a bride just round the corner from the local Canaanite tribes and cities? Because they were all idolatrous, they were all whores, they were all harlots, you know. And he didn't want, it's all about the bloodline, remember? And his bloodline was a clean bloodline. He'd come from the line of Shem, which was a blessed bloodline. And at this point in the scriptures, blood is very important because Messiah wants to come through a pure bloodline. So, and all the Canaanites, remember, came from Canaan. They were the cursed line of Ham. Remember? Ham and his son Canaan, Noach's pervy sons. So he didn't want them intermixing. And we can look at that as behaviour these days. Don't be unequally yoked. Don't get involved with people of the world because it's hard yakka. My new bride, she wasn't a believer when we got married, but I had explained everything that I believed to her, and she loved me. And in agreement, and not long after that, she was immersed and is flying with me now too. And she's on a path of overcoming and going through all these things herself. And it's a personalised path. So the point is, we shouldn't be unequally yoked, because as much as we think we can convert other people, unless we have the right behaviour and unless Yahushua is moving in the situation, more often than not, you get dragged back into the world, unless you're strong. So, and Yahushua is moving. So anyway, don't look for her among the local Canaanite women here, but go further out, back to the land of my birth and my relatives, and find a bride for my son Yitzchak there. And Eleazar said to him, "Of course, my master, but what if the girl refuses to return to this land with me? Should I take Yitzchak back to the land of your father's household to marry her there?" And Abraham sat up straight. "Absolutely not. Yahuwah has already taken me from that land and has told me that this land here is for my children and future descendants. And so my only son's bride must be spotless and of clean blood, not polluted like the Canaanites of this land, in order for my descendants to remain in blood covenant with Yahuwah." Because this was all in the natural at this point. We haven't had Yahushua come and breathe life into the covenants yet, remember? We're just dealing with the covenant. Breathe life into the covenant, I should say. This covenant is all in the natural. It's all shadows. So they had to stay of clean blood. It was very important to stay in the same clean bloodline and don't go and infiltrate with other people. Assimilate not only behaviour and worship styles and idolatry, but also the blood itself. Clean bloodline. The genetics was clean. So he didn't want him to go and take Yitzchak there either, because that land was not the promised land. This was the promised land, and I'm here now, and I want my son's bride to be perfect in this land. Got it? Comprehende? So, do not go back to that land. Stay in this land here. And Abraham put his hand on Eleazar's shoulder. "Do not be troubled, my friend, for Yahuwah will send his messenger ahead of you to prepare the woman, and you will find her with no problems. And if she is still unwilling to return here with you, then you are released from this promise. But under no circumstances are you to take my son to that land." So Eleazar placed his hand under Abraham's thigh, actually on his circumcision, the outward sign of his blood covenant with Yahushua. Put his hand on his willy, mate. Now that might seem pretty strange to us today. What the hell are you doing, man? But as I've written here, we'll read it. "This was not a strange behaviour, since both these men had probably circumcised each other," because they were old, remember, when Yahushua told them to do it. They probably circumcised each other and had a close-knit bond involving the blood covenant. so it wasn't strange for them. It was a blood oath. He put his hand on Abram's circumcision. In other words, I will not let you down, I will not fail you, and I will not rest until this job has been done. Very serious. It's involving the blood covenant. And the sign and seal of that blood covenant, of the blood covenant at that point, was circumcision. And Eleazar solemnly swore to obey everything that Abraham had requested him. So, and Eleazar rose up, saddled 10 camels, and left Abraham's promised land of Canaan, heading out into the world in search for a bride for his only son. And he travelled north for about 17 days, approximately 750 kilometres, to Haran, between the Euphrates and the Tigris River, to the city where Abraham's brother Nahor still lived, where Abram had lived until he was 75 years old. Remember, that's where he was called when Yahushua appeared to Abram and said, I want you to travel. I want you to leave this land of your father and travel down to Canaan. So he's gone back to the land of his father and where his relatives are, because he knows, even though they're all pagan idol worshippers, idolaters, their bloodline is clean because they, same family. And as evening approached, Eleazar kneeled his camels down outside the city by a large fountain of water. So he just travelled 750 kilometres. How many days? 17 days he's travelled. 750 kilometres. Wow. He's arrived at this town, kneeled his camels down outside the large city by a large fountain of water, and the town's women were coming out to the well to collect water. Then Eleazar spoke to Yahushua, please, my master Yahuwah, bring the woman who you have chosen for Yitzchak to me today, and show kindness to your servant Abraham. Let her be the one who not only offers to give me a drink, but my camels also. So he's given, he's made a bit of a deal with Yahushua. Please, you choose this bride. You be the one to choose the bride for Yitzchak, and I will flow with you. And the way I'll know that it's her is if she not only offers to give me a drink, but my camels also. And before he had even finished speaking to Yahushua, Ribkah, who we used to call her Rebecca, but her actual Hebrew name was Ribkah. Ribkah, a beautiful woman who had never been with a man before. Why is that mentioned? I'll go back to it. A beautiful woman who had never been with a man before approached the fountain to fill her jars, and Eleazar ran to meet her, saying, may I have a drink from your jar, please? And she said, of course you can. Here, drink. And lowering the big jar down from her shoulders, she gave him a drink. Then she quickly poured water into the animal trough, giving all his camels a drink too. He didn't even have to search and do interviews and find all different women to work out which was the right one for Yitzchak. He said to Yahushua, please send the woman to me for my master Yitzchak. And the first woman, before he'd even finished speaking to Yahushua, the first woman that came up to him was the one. She said, sure, I'll give you a drink and your camels too. And after Eleazar watched dumbfounded for a while, double checking that Yahushua had indeed brought the right woman to him, he presented her with a gold nose ring and 2 bracelets for her wrists. That was the customary fashion of the time. And asked her, whose daughter are you, child? May I stay in your father's home tonight? Remember when we talked about Sodom and Gomorrah and the guests, how important it was to look after the guests, people staying within your gates? Well, this was just normal customary things. You're in town, can I stay with you, please? So whose daughter are you, child? May I stay in your father's home tonight? And Ribkah replied, I am the daughter of Bethuel, son of Nahor. Son of Nahor. That's Abraham's brother. Please come, we have more than enough food and straw for you and your camels to stay with us tonight. And Eleazar dropped his head in amazement, saying, you are worthy of all praise, Almighty Yahuwah. For not only have you shown your kindness and truth here today, but you have led me straight to my master Abraham's own brother's house. You couldn't get any closer to his descendants, could you? Than his own brother. What are the chances of that ever happening? There's no chance involved. Yahushua orchestrated the whole thing. Do you look at your life like this? Yahushua orchestrates everything. He knows how many hairs are on our head. We don't. He knows everything about us. Do you allow Yahushua to orchestrate your life like this? Or do you think that that's just another topic? No, Yahushua, that's my understanding of Yahushua is one thing, but my life is a different. I've got like church and state. They're two separate things. That's ridiculous. Yahushua wants to be completely involved, possess. He's very possessive. He wants to possess our lives. Do you look at your life like this? What are the chances of that ever happening? Every chance, because there's no chance involved. And Ribkah ran back to her home and informed her family what had just happened. And when her brother Laban saw her new bling, all the jewelry, and heard the story, he came out to greet Eliezer at the fountain also. So this is Laban. This is Ribkah's brother. Came out because, the brother, was looking after his sister and wanted to know what's going on. So he heard the story and came out to see what was going on. And he said, "Traveller, what are you still standing out here for? We have a room waiting for you and enough straw and fodder for your camels too. Come and stay with us tonight." What amazing hospitality for a stranger, yeah? And when the camels were settled and water had been provided for everyone to wash the journey from their feet, the food was served and laid down before them. But Eliezer said, "Before we eat, let me tell you why I'm really here." And they said, "Please tell us." So Eliezer said, "I am the servant of your brother Abraham, who Yahuwah has blessed, and he has become a very wealthy man of flocks, herds, silver and gold, servants, camels and donkeys. And his wife Sarah had a child when she was very old, and this child has been given everything my master owns, but he still has no wife. So my master Abraham made me promise to find his only son a wife, but not from the local Canaanites where we live, but to go to his father's own house, to his relatives, and find a wife there." And Eliezer retold the miraculous events that had happened that very evening with Ribkah at the well, before asking Bethuel, "Please tell me straight away whether you agree to me taking your daughter back for my master's son to marry or not." He didn't want to waste time. He'd made an agreement. Remember, put his hand on his master's circumcision and said, "I won't rest until I've found this." All right? And both Bethuel and Laban both agreed. Both the father and brother both agreed and said, "It's pretty obvious that you're Elohim," because they're pagans, they've got lots of deities, they've got lots of gods. But they've said, "It's pretty obvious that your mighty one, your Elohim, has brought you all this way and has orchestrated all this today." So what can we say about it? It's pretty obvious, so what can we do about it? Of course you may take Ribkah back with you, so she can become the wife of your master's son, just as Yahuwah had said. And after eating and drinking, Eliezer presented more gifts to Ribkah of silver, gold, and fine garments, and also gifts to her brother and mother before spending the night in their home. I'm going to talk to you about the customary marriage ceremony in this time, but I'll wait till a little bit later because we'll finish this part of the story first. The next morning, so he's offered them gifts, which is what you do. This is the bride price. He's offering the father of the bride gifts to purchase his daughter as a bride. This is what they did back then. The next morning, Eliezer rose up and said to Ribkah's family, "It's time for me to return to my master with your daughter." But they said, "Let Ribkah stay at least 10 more days with us, please, then you can take her." But Eliezer wanted to obey his master Abraham's instructions as diligently as possible. This is the example of a perfect servant, a perfect messenger. But Eliezer wanted to obey his master's instructions as diligently as possible and said, "I'm sorry, I can't wait around. We really need to go today." So they thought it best to let Rivka decide whether she was willing to go with this stranger to a faraway land and marry a man she'd never even laid eyes on. And Rivka believed in the words. Like this, she's brought up a pagan, but she believed in the words and promises spoken by Eliezer. And she said, "I will go back with you today." No woman in their right mind would say that, would they? So Yahushua must have been working in this situation. Yahushua was orchestrating everything. He'd been working on her heart and prepared her heart so that when this messenger came along, she saw his behavior, she saw his message, she saw the promise to her. Abraham was a wealthy man and had given all his wealth to his son, but he needed a wife. And she thought, "I will go with you and I will do that." Amazing. And because she was still a young teen, her family gave Rivka her childhood nurse, Deborah, to travel with her, and they spoke words of blessing to her, saying, "Our sister, our dearest daughter, you will indeed be the mother to millions and millions, and let your children overcome all enemies that rise against them." And they kissed her, and she left, following Eliezer on the camels. Isn't that remarkable? And they travelled back home to Canaan. Not long after these events, Yitzhak travelled back from the north and was out in the fields thinking and pondering and meditating. And when he looked up, he could see the camels approaching in the distance. And as they got a little closer, Rivka saw Yitzhak and climbed off her camel, saying, "Who is that man approaching us? Who is that handsome man approaching us?" And Eliezer said, "That is Yitzhak, my master." So she took a veil and covered herself. And when they arrived, Eliezer greeted Yitzhak, telling him of the phenomenal way in which Yahushua had found him a bride. And Yitzhak brought Rivka into his mother Sarah's tent, and taking her in his arms, she became his wife, and he loved her very much. And this brought great comfort to Yitzhak after the recent death of his mother. So where was the marriage ceremony? Where was the wedding? Where was the rings? Where was the millions and millions of dollars worth of splendor and indulgence that goes on? Where is all the pomp and ceremony? Where was the minister to stand up there and marry them? This is the most purest form of a scripture. At this point in scripture, we're being told how a marriage occurred. We're not told. We know after reading this how, but we're not told in other instances how they became married. But we know Abraham and Sarah, how'd they get married? It says here. They just did it. Because marriage and intercourse are the same thing. So when you're brought up in religion and are you allowed to have sex before you're married? Is having sex before you're married a sin? Is it this? Is it not? It's the wrong question, because it's not a matter of having sex before marriage, because marriage is sex. Sex is marriage. It's the same thing. Do you understand that? Let me read this turquoise bit. This is still the purest example of how a man and woman are joined in a marriage covenant. Commitment and consummation. Consummation means sex. The first act of intercourse not only provided the shed blood required to form, where'd the blood come from? I'll explain it in a minute. The first act of intercourse not only provided the shed blood required to form the covenant, but in this case, the seed which passed through Yitzhak's circumcision, the outward sign of the blood covenant, was planted into the womb of a clean bloodline, continuing the promise of deliverance. Do you understand that? Yitzhak was circumcised also, so his blood had been shed on his penis, so he was signed, sealed, and delivered. No, he was sealed in the covenant, the blood covenant of deliverance. So any seed, any semen that passed through him into the woman, and the woman was clean too, from a clean bloodline. And she was taken into Sarah's tent, who was a covenant woman as well. The marriage home, see the significance of the marriage home. We're talking about shadows, types and shadows. It's all about returning the people to the marriage home, returning them to the Garden of Eden. And at this point, it's only on a natural level. But this consummation shows us what's happened before. Well, instead of me rambling on a little bit more, I found a section in a really good book I was reading the other day, not the other day, months ago, and I want to read a little bit of it to you because it's from Todd's book. Where is it? It's in Kindle. Here we are. To fully appreciate this prophetic concept, it is important to understand the ancient ceremonies regarding a marriage. So, I could have read this before we read Sending Eliezer Out. I'm reading it now because I want you to understand the whole concept culturally. I want you to immerse yourself in this culture, not because we live in that culture, but I want you to understand that culture so that you can grasp its significance for us today, and of course what Yahushua did. So to fully appreciate this concept, this prophetic event, Yitzhak getting a wife, it's important to understand the ancient ceremonies regarding a marriage. So for all you young people who aren't married yet, it's important to understand how to do it properly. Don't look at the world. The world is a shim-sham and a rip-off. It's all idolatry and pagan and wicked and just there to cause you heartache and stress and pressure and hideous. So, the instance of Abraham finding a bride for his promised son is a good example of a wedding agreement. Often the father or a representative, which was Eliezer, would bring wealth and goods to strike up a deal. Negotiations would take place, and if an agreement was reached, the future bride would either consent or reject the offer, and Rivka accepted. If the bride consented, they would seal the agreement with wine, a meal, and the payment of the bride price, which they did too. Eliezer had a meal with Laban and the family, so they sealed the agreement with wine, a meal, and the payment of the bride price. That's why he was giving them jewels and gems and treasures and riches to pay for the bride. This was the bride price. I want you to understand this because it comes up later lots of times. In this culture, you had to offer someone something to marry their daughter because their daughter was a prized possession, and meant a lot to them. If you're going to come along and take her, we don't know who you are. What are you going to offer us? So, offer the bride price. A written contract called a ketubah would be signed, and at that point, the bride and the groom may have never met face to face. Yitzhak had never met Rivka. They lived far away land, 750 kilometers away from each other. So the bride and groom may have never met face to face, but they are considered to be husband and wife. And the relationship could only be severed by divorce. So once that's signed, they're considered to be husband and wife, even though there's been no consummation yet. You see where we're going here? In the back of your mind, I want you to think of Mount Sinai and the covenant, which was the ketubah, the written covenant. And where are we in this now? Where are we? Have we been consummated with our bridegroom yet? No, but we are married still, because remember, the bride price has been paid. Who paid the bride price? Yahushua paid the bride price with his own blood. So we are legally married to him, but we have not been consummated yet. Anyway, let's go on with this. Just keep the significance and the fulfillments in your mind as we go through this. Next page. And she belonged to her husband. It is a marriage contract called betrothal. So they're betrothed. Although the relationship does not actually turn into a blood covenant until the blood has been shed when the two become one. How does that happen? That event may occur after the passage of time, depending upon their age and preparation. So if two families got their children together and said we want them to be married when they're grown up, they might do this while they're still children, like an arranged marriage. They have the feast and they do the marriage ketubah, but consummation, of course, doesn't happen until they're adults. But they're betrothed to each other, which means if anybody else comes along and either sleeps with the bride or takes her, seizes her, does anything, it's a great crime, because she's endowed, she's betrothed to another man. So, it is a marriage contract called betrothal, although the relationship does not actually turn into a blood covenant until the blood has been shed when the two become one. That event may occur after the passage of time, depending upon their age and preparations. The groom may come to fetch his bride, or, as in the case of Ribkah, the bride may be brought to meet the groom. The precise timing would be up to the groom and his father once the necessary preparations have been completed. So that's happened between Ribkah and Yitzhak, that's happened. Between the time of the agreement and the physical joining, the bride prepares herself for the husband. This is where we're at now, guys. Between the time of the agreement, that agreement was laid out at Sinai, made official, in stone, written in stone. And the physical joining, between that time, we haven't been physically joined to Yahusha yet because he hasn't returned. The wedding feast, the marriage supper of the Lamb hasn't happened yet. But during that time, the bride prepares herself for her husband. She clearly must remain a virgin, and she would keep herself spotless for her husband. She would also prepare herself to be a good wife. She must know how to take care of the house once she is brought to live in the house. She's been brought out of her family, away from her mother and father, and she's here to start her own family, and she knows how to serve her husband, knows how to look after everything. There's a scripture in Proverbs about Yahusha, how Yahusha wants a wife to be, how Yahusha wants a woman to be. I forget the chapter, you can find it. So Yahusha has clear instructions of how he wants his bride and how he wants his women to behave. So, once the bride and groom are brought together, they go and consummate the marriage. So it's official. They go and consummate the marriage. If the bride was a virgin, her blood would be shed during their union. The first time a woman has sex, there's a little bit of blood that comes from down there. The blood shed by the bride as the husband pierced the veil of her hymen would complete the covenant process. So blood was shed. See the significance? Once you are old enough and you consummate, the first time a woman has sex, there's a little bit of blood because there's a little bit of a veil down there covering her. And once the man pierces that, there's a little bit of bloodshed. And in this culture, the blood spilled on the sheet would actually be held up as proof, because the man has gone and paid some family for a spotless bride, for a virgin bride. So if the servants or whoever held up the sheet then after the consummation and there was no blood on it, he'd know he'd been cheated. He'd been sold someone who wasn't pure. This is the culture. You know, where do we stand these days in the 21st century? The blood spilled on the sheet would actually be held as proof. It was a sign and bore witness to the marriage covenant. It was a sign and bore witness to the marriage covenant. So we've got an everlasting blood covenant, and we've got the marriage covenant, which is coming into that. The marriage covenant is very tightly woven into the deliverance, into the blood covenant of deliverance. It's almost a similar thing, because Yahushua is using the whole shadow of marriage here to show us what he wants with his bride. He wants a perfect, spotless bride, like when he created Adam and Kuah, in a perfect garden, in a perfect hedge, surrounded by the love of his everlasting covenant. And it was a perfect marriage home, covenant home. And that's the whole purpose of Scripture, to get his bride, buy his bride back from the enemy. The enemy came and stole his bride. Now he has to, it's his bride to start with. Now he has to come in the flesh and buy her back. So the whole idea of the bride price is very important. Purchasing a bride, you have to purchase. You couldn't just go and, it's not casual like it is these days. You had to go and make an agreement with another family and purchase her and be accepted by the family and by the bride. So it's very important, the blood covenant. So the blood that the woman shed in this case was a sign that this was the perfect blood covenant marriage. This has clear connections with the kuppah. Some call it chuppah. It's a kuppah. CH in Hebrew is a k sound, kuppah. Many get, what is a kuppah? A kuppah, when you look at a Jewish weddings, apart from the wacky little hats, they're standing under a big square thing. Notice that in a Jewish wedding, they're standing under a big thing with veils all around it. That's called a kuppah. Many get married under a kuppah these days, which is a prayer shawl. or a sheet used as a covering or a tent over the bride and groom while they exchange their vows. And I mean, that's all gone. Hollywood as well. They just do the whole bride with white. It's all in white and it's all pagan. And what do we need to do all that rubbish for? There's still wedding rings, pagan, honouring the goddess Venus. You know, there's all paganism in the world today, but they still put a little thing over them. The Jewish nation has gone completely pagan, just like everybody else. When we're talking about Yisrael later on, we're not even talking about the land of Yisrael today, or the Jews, or, you know, it's all gone political, it's all gone geographical. We're not even talking about that. We're talking about something totally different. We're talking about a covenant people, which you don't see much of these days. So anyway, while all the weddings today are completely a rip-off and pagan and, you know, ridiculous, this is the legal part of the relationship that preceded the union of the couple. It involved the reading of the terms of the marriage. This was as far as Yisrael got at Sinai. The bride and groom would later lie on a sheet where the blood was spilled during their physical union. If there was no blood, the covenant would not be complete. So the blood on the sheet would be the sign of the covenant. Got it? The proof that this marriage was legit, if there was blood on the sheet. During this process, there was a wedding banquet filled with guests celebrating the union. The wedding feast would last for 7 days. That's pretty cool. And was a time of joy. One cannot ignore the connection with the appointed time of Sukkoth. A Sukkoth is a tent. So a kuppah is symbolic of the covenant house. That's why the bride and groom would get married under the covenant house, to symbolise we are starting our covenant home and we are involving Yahusha in it. That's how it should be. These days it's all gone arse up. And of course it's related to the time of Sukkoth, when Yahusha not only was born, but around the time when he will return, and we will enter the Sukkoth. We will enter the New Jerusalem, and there will be the Simchat Torah, the joy of Torah. So that's enough of that there, because then it goes into, then Todd goes, this is Todd Bennett's book here, and he goes into what happened at Mount Sinai then. But we're not up to Mount Sinai yet, are we, guys? You've got to be patient. So I just want to explain to you the culture of this time and how the marriage goes on. It's supposed to happen. And today, if you're a young person that hasn't been married, the pressure is off. You don't have to do all that. You don't have to do what the world tells you to do, because a husband and wife come together and they're married. You know? My bride and I, my new bride, we got married because it was a consummation. We made an agreement with each other and we got consummated. We consummated and made the marriage real. And we didn't tell anybody for a while because we had, you know, all the peanut gallery around us who would have said things. You can't do this and you've been divorced and da-da-da-da-da. So we didn't tell any of them. And then later on we told them that we got married and we got some photos taken. But it's our own personal business. Once you've been through the horrific guilt and shame of everything that you go through a divorce, even though I didn't have a say in it, when your bride leaves, you just got to pick up the pieces and go on. There's nothing I could do about it. I promised everything and tried everything at the time, but she went. So Yahusha has restored everything for me in my life and bringing everything, given me someone who is just working alongside me in every single aspect of anything. I can't look at anything or try anything or want to fix anything or do anything without her right next to me wanting to help. Perfect helper. So, and Yahusha's working in her, showing her what he wants her to do with her behaviours and her this and everything. So it's Yahusha's doing everything. So it's not a religious experience, this is a real experience. Yahusha gives us what we need if we flow with him. So for young people, if you're going to go out there and start hitting on women or boys, start kissing people, if you look up the dictionary definition of kissing, your lips are an erogenous zone. What is an erogenous zone? An erogenous zone is a zone in your body, there's about 5 or 6 or 7 of them, that you feel sexual pleasure from. There's some obvious ones, but your lips are actually an erogenous zone. So if you keep kissing someone on the lips, what's going to happen? You're going to want to do something more with them. And the dictionary definition of kissing, it will say, kissing someone for a period of time will lead to coitus. What is coitus? Coitus is sexual intercourse. So if you want to go out there kissing someone, boys, if you start kissing someone on the lips, you're going to start getting an erection. And I'll tell you what, if you get an erection, you're going to want to put it somewhere, aren't you? So you might as well take the temptation away. This is how Yahusha feels about it. I mean, out there in the world, anything goes. You either got one-night stands and orgies and men with men and women with women and, you know, people marrying their horse, people marrying the trees. You know, it's complete ridiculous and harlotry out in the world today. But if you want to save yourself for your partner and have a happy life, do it the right way, don't go kissing people, you know. Do it this way. You know, you don't have to be arranged. You can choose your own partner. But I'm just saying, you make friends with somebody first and you be upfront and honest with them. This is what I believe. Because I wasn't going to give up Yahusha for no one. So if somebody said to me, oh, that's ridiculous, I don't even want to be with you. Well, that's great. I'd rather be with Yahusha. But my bride agreed. And so that's why it worked for us. She wasn't immersed, I don't think, when we first got married. But my behaviour was different to my last marriage. We were very religious back then. We'd gone through the Christianity thing together, we'd gone through the Messianics, gone through the Nazarene thing together, and even that was still very religious. The rules and regulations and this and that and this and that. But mainly in the behaviour. The love has to come through. So this time, instead of preaching and teaching everything with her, I just want to let the behaviour come through. And she could see, because she'd had a hard life too, that there was something different about me. And I kept saying that she was flabbergasted at me. And I'm just an asshole, I'm an idiot. And I couldn't believe it. It's not me. There's nothing about me you're obviously looking at. It must be Yahusha. And this was the first time in my life that somebody had responded to Yahusha in me. And so that in itself was why she wanted to go for it herself and get immersed. So, and you know, we've never looked back. But I want you to know, young people, that you don't have to go in there and look at what they're spending on marriages these days. Look, I'll take you to Chris's Facebook page. Christopher posted things last week about marriage. Look at this. Muslim wedding film. People are starving. Look at the expense put into this waste of time. Looks like the Western influence is spreading into the societies of the rich. The biggest Lebanese wedding in Australia. Tony and Abra. Wait, can I go down? Yep. Biggest Lebanese wedding in Australia. Look at that. Look at these diamond crystal chandeliers. Look at this. Most Australians have no idea that such lavish occasions are happening, and they could not imagine such expense. Everyone wonders where such wealth comes from, and it is squandered on such madness when children are dying every minute. I say to my clients, if they're willing to listen, don't even go and have a Barbie and tell everyone to bring a plate. You know, you don't have to do all this stuff, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, you know, even $5,000 or $10,000. It's go and get yourself a deposit for a house or something. And say, oh, we've already got a house. Well, go on a trip, go on a holiday. You're spending all this money on people that in 20 years you're going to look at the photos and go, who the hell is that? We don't even remember who that person is. And you've just spent $100, $200 a head on them to feed them. It's complete customary, modern customs, 21st century BS. You don't have to do it. We didn't do anything on our last one. We didn't even have a feast. We got some photos taken just to keep some of the relos happy. You know, like it's a complete waste of time. My wife is Miss New York. Look at her. Imagine if this wealth was donated to the poor, bringing water, hospitals, training and education, nurses and tradespeople. Don't think the madness will stop. That's what prophecy teaches. Look at them. I mean, I'm not going to go through all the different elements of a modern wedding and explain to you how pagan it is, but you know, it's all carrying on the sun worship. It's all carrying on the fertility. Why do they throw rice or confetti at weddings? Because it symbolises sperm. You're throwing sperm over the couple so that they'll be fertile and have lots of children. That's why people throw confetti, and now you have to throw rice because the confetti dies. The pigment in the confetti dyes the concrete and people get upset. So you've got to throw rice or throw something over the bride and groom. Throw the rice, quick, throw your sperm over them. It's all about fertility, you know. And then we've got to honour Venus, goddess Venus, by putting a wedding ring on. And the white rose. I mean, how many brides are virgins these days? Why are you wearing white? White is a symbol of purity. It's BS. You're not even who you say you are, you know. You should be wearing bright red with lipstick and FM boots. That's what you should be wearing. Most of them are whores. So China's rich girls, that's enough of that. So where are we, brothers and sisters, with the scriptures? I've taken you on that bit of a journey so that you can see the difference between the world and what happened with Yitzhak and his bride. He took her into his mother's tent and he loved her. He embraced her. Clearly they slept together and they consummated the marriage. They were married. Where was the pastor? Where was the preacher? Where was the bishop to marry them? By the power vested in me. What power do you have? You don't have any power. The only person who can bring two people together in marriage is Yahusha. And he says, who I bring together, let no man put asunder. So I held to that. No matter what hell I went through in my last marriage, I was not going to leave. I wasn't going to break my covenant. In the end, she went through. She blew through, didn't want Yahusha, didn't want anything. She's out there having her life, partying on, doing whatever the hell she wants. But my marriage, let no one break asunder. Do not break wedlock. You know, if it happens to you, it happens to you. You can only try, but do not break wedlock. That's the commandment. What I bring together, let no man put asunder. What I bring together, let no one split apart. So Yahusha hates divorce. And he divorced his people a couple of times because of, I mean, how wicked must their behaviour have been for him to divorce them. So it gives you a bit of perspective, having been through a divorce, the most horrific thing I thought could ever happen to me. But you go through it, and Yahusha picks you up, he guides you, he leads you, you know, and he brings you to greener pastures and provides everything you need. Giving me another bride, giving me 2 more wonderful children. So we've got a family of 10 now, 10 kids up here, and we know we're alive. Every night's a party, every meal is a party, and there's all sorts of chaos going on, and we're constantly getting the fire extinguisher out, extinguishing demons from conversations. It's madness, half of it. So I just wanted you to see, go for the real thing. Young brothers and sisters who haven't been married and not married yet, don't go kissing up on women and men, and don't go getting into that whole scene. Wait for Yahusha to provide someone for you. Because how hard would it be to hide who you really are? How hard would it be if you had to go and get married on the Shabbat? And I wouldn't. And I'd be saying the same thing to my children. If you're going to go and get married on the Shabbat, I guess you don't want me there. And you can't blame me, because I've been telling you this for years and years and years and years. So if you want me to be at your wedding, you better not have it on the Shabbat. So how hard would it be marrying an unbeliever in that state if they're not willing to work with you? So we've gone for nearly an hour, guys. That's enough. Now there's a little journey there, little map for you. We can see over here that up here was further up that you can't see on the map was where Noah's Ark was, and Garden of Eden was down here somewhere. And so remember Abram, because we're coming to the end of the story of Abraham. He was from the Valley of Ur, which is just near Babylon, which is full of paganism, and of course Sodom and Gomorrah. Oh no, sorry, not Sodom and Gomorrah, they're over here. Babylon, Tower of Babel, all that. So he travelled all the way over here with his father to Koran, then his father died, and then they travelled all the way, and apparently that was about 750 kilometres. Nearly 1,000 kilometres down, and he moved around here. Abraham was moving around here. Why? Because this whole land here is the land of Canaan, the promised land. I'll give you more detailed maps as we go on, but this land of Canaan, I've only added the places that are mentioned so far, so as to not confuse myself as well. And then Abraham went down to Egypt and came back, and got Mount Moriah there where Yitzhak was supposed to be sacrificed, but Yahusha rescued him. Bethel, Shechem. The terebinth trees were over here near Shechem. And he went, so Abraham sends his servant all the way back up here, back to Haran, to his brother. That's where Ribkah comes from. And they travel all the way back to the promised land, and she marries Yitzchak. And so I hope I was clear in that reading of Todd's book, and the understanding of marriage is phenomenal. Everything that happens in the natural with us and our wife, the things we want from our partners, understanding, attention, this and that, this is what Yahushua wants. He uses marriage in the natural to show us what he wants from his bride. He wants to be all encompassed in our relationship with him. He wants to possess our bodies. He wants to be able to live through us, to love. His love should come through us. That's what the marriage is all about. So that was the marriage pattern. And this marriage pattern is we're going to see that go through as we go on into the scriptures. It's all about the bride price. It's all about the blood covenant and having a pure bloodline. So I'm going to leave it there, brothers and sisters. I hope you enjoyed that. Love you. Bye-bye. Take us to that city. Shofars usher down.